Welcome. You're on listening to The Mindful Experiment, and this is your host, Dr. Vic. I'm excited to have you on. This is our second time we're going live on Facebook. So if you have not joined us, go check it out on Facebook. Just go to Empowered Living with Dr. Vic, and you can join us every Tuesday at 7 a.m. Central Time. Today, we're going to be talking about why we behave the way we do. And it's one of those things in life where we kind of what dictates our behaviors? What dictates why we do what we do? And, in life, we look at things from a perspective of good and bad, right? We look at something and say, well, that's good and that's bad. My question to ask you, and I know I've been there, and I do that, especially since I'm in the holistic health field. I do that more often when it comes to health. My question, though, is what's good and what's bad? Why? Is there like this universal law of what's good and what's bad? Or is it just is, right? It's like this beautiful quote, and I apologize, I didn't research. I have it in my book. I should know who this is by. But life has no meaning except the meaning you put on it, right? And when you think about that for a second, your life has no meaning except the meaning you give it. Your life has no meaning except the stuff you put on it. Everything that happens in your life, it only exists because of what you put to it, how you see it, what energy you pour towards it, what vantage point do you see it from. And so when you look at life from that perspective, now all of a sudden, is something good or is something bad is really just the preference of how you want to see it, right? Because an event can happen to 100 people. In that 100 people, you're going to get a variety of different stories. You're going to get different people who are impacted in different ways. And they're going to be influenced and affected in a different aspect because of how they viewed it, right? Like, for example, when you look at behavior and how this plays a role, well, if it's not about good and bad, and we're not looking at our life from that perspective, then the question becomes, okay, then what kind of rules what we do and what programmed us, what allowed us to be who we are today? What is those motivators or those things that have us running a certain way day in and day out? And so in life, I think today in society especially, we're so hooked on who's right and who's wrong, and we bash one for the other. Later on today, I'll be interviewing somebody who wrote a book called I'm Right and You're an Idiot. And I can't, so I had to read the book. And I'm excited I love the title of that because I think in society, that's where we are. And it's all about, not about bringing discussion and conversation to a table and just let's share our opinions, our values, because that's what you're really sharing is your values. You're not sharing your opinions. You share what you value and how you see something. It doesn't mean you're right. I know it's hard to swallow sometimes, even for myself. It just means that it's something that you value. And so when we look at how we behave a specific way, okay, it's going to come down to a couple things. And one of those is, what is the belief system you have? And your belief system is something that you've seen over and over to believe that to be true. Something that you say that this is how my life is. Just whatever shows up in your life, if it's on a consistent basis, you're going to develop that to be a belief system. And once you have it as a belief system, now all of a sudden that dictates your life. Right? And so, but your belief system comes from a hierarchy of values. Like, for example, I have an extreme high value for health, right? I want to make sure I'm as healthy as I possibly can be so that I can be the best version of myself every single day. Now, when it comes to that belief system, my actions and how I see things and what I do is going to be dictated by that value system, because I believe based on, and I do have facts. Right here I go now. Right here comes right and wrong. I have facts to prove what I do, and I like to have those facts and that data. But at the same token, though, I have developed a belief system, though, of actions to move forward and do the things that I do to help me with my health, to make sure that I'm being the best version. And yes, my brain, my ego, my left side of my brain likes to have information to back it up so that I'm not doing something just on the whim. I'm doing something because I have research, I have evidence, I have proof to show that, hey, this is what it is. But this comes to the second point I want to share with you guys today, and that's stories, right? What are the stories you tell yourself? What are the stories that you believe? Because the story that you tell yourself on a daily basis is going to dictate your life and how you live. The story that you create is the meaning you put on life. Does that make sense? The 100 people who had an event in their life, the way they take that is the story that they tell themselves and the story that they tell other people after the event has happened. So when you look at your life and you look at the stories, what are the things are you telling yourself on a daily basis? What are the things that you believe, right? Society is truly controlled by stories. You know, I was on a podcast, I was interviewed last Friday, and it was really one of my good friends, loved this guy, great inspiration. And he asked me a question that I thought was so profound, and I recommend, I'll have the podcast shared when it comes out. But he asked me a question that I thought was just so awesome, because I don't think people see it this way a lot. And that was, he goes, the people who do evil or do harmful things or don't do things that help the environment or do things that actually harm our health, he goes, do they know that they're doing evil or doing harmful things? Or is there a difference, something different there? And I was like, that's a beautiful question. And thank you for asking. And I'm like, it's the truth is, here's the thing, right? Stories dictate their life. They think they're saving the world, right? When you look at a company like Monsanto is a genetically modified organism company. They're Roundup, right? It's the pesticide company. Monsanto comes from the oil companies. When you start to look at what they really are, that's where their money came from. That's how they became dominant in the agriculture. And they're known for their pesticides, weed killers, and all that stuff that goes on. And what happened was, in chiropractic, there was, in our leadership of chiropractors, there was one that was at this big event, and he had to pay a lot of money to be there. And he was sitting down next to one of the VPs of Monsanto. And he literally puts on Facebook, I'm sitting next to the devil next to me. And long story short, what was interesting is he had an open mind, and he's like, you know what? I think sometimes people have stories of what they believe. They follow a belief system, and it may not be the best belief system or the more higher level of it, right? So he just got to know the person, asked questions, and he goes, oh, you work for Monsanto? He goes, yeah. He goes, we're here to save the world. We're here to feed the world. We have a technology that we use that can help feed the entire world and end hunger. And he was so convinced on that, right? That was a story that he was convinced that dictated his actions of what he did. And he got bought into that story. And now everything he does, he thinks he's doing for the greater good. That doesn't mean that, you know, he's living a fulfilled life based on where he's at and the things he has to go through. But that's the kind of concept. And now he goes, he's a beautiful person. He's like, very inspirational, he goes, the guy's an amazing guy. His story may not be as optimal, and he may not see things. And the thing is, once you're bought into a story, you're not changing. I mean, you can, but it's very hard to change because you're bought into it. It's like telling a medical doctor for 20 years who's been prescribing medications and doing all this stuff that you've been harming the body for so long and just masking symptoms and never really taking care of someone's health. They don't want to hear that. You know, they're bought into a story. They're bought into a belief system, right? The greatest leader, in my opinion, one of the greatest, I should say, of all time, and this is not a very popular opinion when I say this, is Adolf Hitler. And the reason why I say that is because he had to lead a country to believe in his mission, to buy his story, right? He had to get people on board with something that was so harsh, something that was so one of the worst things humanity has ever seen. I mean, I think the numbers come to like 20-something million people that died during that process. So I'm not an advocate. I'm not condoning what he did. I'm totally against it. But from a leadership perspective, that's where I'm trying to come from. He had people buy into a story and they built into a belief system. And from there, everything led the way when it came to that, right? And so this is how corporations control society in senses, because they got to get you to buy into a story. And after you keep telling yourself the story, it develops to become a belief system, and all of a sudden it's controlled. This happens in the healthcare world so much. I mean, with big pharma, vaccines, I mean, regardless where you stand on that, I'm not getting into that in this podcast. This is not all about that. But it's very interesting that, I, from a holistic standpoint, just having conversations with people, just trying to understand where the research comes from, where their mindset is. And because I love asking questions to understand where the other person is getting their information, where the other person is coming from, so that I can have a better understanding of why they have a certain opinion, right? What's the stories they've been telling themselves, or stories they've been exposed to? What's the belief systems that they've been hearing over time and time again, right? One of Adolf Hitler's top advisors used to say, tell a lie long enough and loud enough and people will start to believe you, right? There's that belief system. Mainstream media is really good at sharing the same words and the same message throughout all the networks. There's a reason why they do that. Because if you keep hearing the same message, eventually it has to be true. If you start reading the same message on internet and newspapers, if people even do that nowadays, and print material, you are going to believe it. And once you believe it, it becomes part of your reality. Now, all of a sudden, that's what you're going to start to see, and that's what you're going to start to experience. So, had to get the dark stuff out of the way. But what can you do then, right? What can you do to change your life? Let's say you're looking at your life right now, whether you're a business owner, you're an entrepreneur, you're a stay-at-home mom, you're a 9-to-5-er, whatever it is. And there's nothing wrong with any of those. Whatever you're doing in your life, how can you, let's say you don't like what you're at, or you're not achieving as high as you want, what can you do? Now, the message here is extremely simple. And I know sometimes people take it because there's no way it's that simple. But you gotta understand there's a lot of rules behind this that I can't share in a 15, 20-minute podcast. But one of the things is that change the story you tell yourself. Because if you can go back to how we started this podcast episode and get into that, life has no meaning except the meaning you put on it, okay? Now you have value systems, beliefs, and stories. Change your story. Totally see something like a kid and believe in it 100%. Just believe it, whatever that is. And don't let your ego come in, right? Especially as a health professional, for myself, I know a lot about the body. Thankfully, I also have a background in energy medicine, which says I don't know anything about the body. So it's like a beautiful balance for me. But one of the things is that I have to always be cautious about is that if I have something going on with my body, symptom, a condition, whatever, I first go into my doctor hat and I'm like, okay, this means that, this is why this is happening, this is what's going on here, and I try to figure all that out. But at the same token, I'm like, hold on, wait a minute. How about I just put a belief system to say, this is why I'm going through that. This is what I'm gonna do, and I see myself healing or whatever, and this is how it's gonna go. And I 100% convince myself to believe that. And then I reinforce that belief system with stories to support that, right? And I have to do this consciously because my mind, my subconscious and other areas of my brain are not going to be following suit. My ego is going to go, buddy, that doesn't work that way. I know better because I've been here with all the experiences and I'm recording everything, so I know how this should be. And so there's that inner battle. But you really have to believe like a child. I mean, that's what children do. Children believe in something, and then they see that in their reality. And sometimes as adults, we're like, this is so foreign because we are not where they are mentally. Their minds are different than ours. They haven't been conditioned yet. And so you really have to be convinced that you are, whatever you're stating is going to be this. And then build a story on the outside to believe in that. And tell it to yourself every single day. And if you do this over a period of time, when the divine time happens, right? Because everything happens only when you're ready to experience it. that will be the moment that you achieve, experience whatever it is that you desire. Whatever you want to get to that level to, you will get there. Whatever it is, it can be just having dinner every night with your family. It can be making $1 million a year. It can be being the healthiest version of you. It can be running a marathon under a certain period of time. It can be doing competing in the CrossFit games. I mean, whatever it is you want. I mean, the opportunities are endless, but it's really paying attention. And the reason why I say this is because this is how your brain works. This is how your ego works. And what we got to do is be conscious and reprogram that. Because what happens is with ego is you have an experience, right? And you see it once. And you're like, maybe a coincidence. It happens again. Then you're like, okay, maybe. Then it happens a third and fourth, and ego goes, this is something we need to pay attention to. And then all of a sudden, the brain's now starting to look for things, or the ego is, to prove whatever it is to be true. If you don't think that you're good enough in something, you're going to have ego create experience, or the universe and ego are going to work together to create experiences for you to see all the time that you're not good enough, because the filter you're looking through is looking at not being good enough. That's why the story and the belief system has to be to change your life. You have to go in that perspective. I'm not one that says, like, this is how you have to do it. But these are one of the things that has just been an absolute truth, that the stories that we tell ourselves is what's going to dictate reality. I mean, it's look at history. Take a moment and look at all the wars and everything that has gone on in society. And it's always been a story that has dictated things and moved society, rather than actual, like, where's the truth and where's all that. And I think sometimes some of the people may orchestrate things. They know that if they can sell people on a story, politicians do this. How can we sell someone on a story? Heck, lawyers are masters at this, right? Our court system and our justice system is not what people think it is. It's all about who can create the best story to convince somebody something, and that's it. If you can sell that story, person's going to get off, or whatever it may be, in that journey, in that process. So the recap, everything for this episode is really just to remember, change your story. What is it that your stories that you're telling yourself, right? What can you believe in anything? Because remember this, life has no meaning except the meaning you give it. And so if you give a belief system, right, you are dictating what that meaning should be. Now build a story behind that to support that, and just keep telling yourself that story until all of a sudden you will eventually believe it unconsciously. And then that's when the magic happens. Because as the old saying goes, as some people would say, fake it until you make it. This is one of the principles of why that came from, is because it's all about what story can you tell yourself, even though it's not true. You have a belief system and you can keep moving forward. So that's all I got for today, guys. As always, I appreciate you being on. Thank you for tuning in live. And check out, if you're interested in tuning in live with us, just go to Facebook, Empowered Living with Dr. Vic, and you can go ahead and tune it. This will be in the show notes for the video episode also. But until next time, keep rocking and rolling, y'all.